My family owns an old house in the northern countryside. It was passed on to my father by my late grandparents a couple years back. We would occasionally use it for family reunions and such with the extended family, but most of the time no one lives there since most of us live in the bigger cities. It's not all abandoned though. We do have a caretaker go by from time to time to clean the place up a bit, or just to make sure that the house is still in good condition. Since I had a month off from university because of the semester break, I thought it would be a good idea to visit the old place and unwind there for a week or so. My parents didn't mind and even encouraged my little vacation since they've seen how stressed I've been the past few weeks. I left the city early the next day and arrived at the house by noon. Despite the cool breeze local to the north, it was a scorcher of a day. I pulled up on the driveway and parked underneath the shade of the roofed area just beside the front door. Once I got out of the car, I was surprised to see that Alex, the caretaker, was there. The frail-looking old man smiled and waved at me from inside the house. I went in and was instantly hit with the strong smell of air fresheners. I couldn't help but gag a bit to Alex's amusement. And as I wiped my face with a handkerchief, I asked what he was doing there. He put down the room and bottle of Febreze and explained that my parents had called him yesterday. They told him that I'd be staying at the house for a few days, so he went ahead and cleaned the place up a bit for me. As thanks, I told him to stick around and I'd order us some lunch. We unpacked my stuff into one of the bedrooms on the second floor. The room smelled a bit musty and the smell of old furniture hung in the air. Alex said it was my dad's old room back when he still lived there. The room still had a lot of his old stuff, a shelf full of books, and his old work desk. After I settled in, he gave me a quick run-through of where the important stuff was, like the fire extinguisher in case I needed it or some cleaning supplies. Half an hour later, our food arrived, so we settled into the dining room to eat. We made a little small talk as we ate, mainly just catching up, the usual how are things going and shit like that. We complained about the heat and how the fans in the common areas barely offered any comfort from it. He just finished running a towel over his sweaty brow when he asked me the obvious question. I'm sure there are a lot fancier places you could have had your vacation. Why stay in this old place? He said, taking a sip from his coffee. It's real quiet here, I told him. It's a lot more peaceful than any hotel I could ever book. He couldn't help but nod in agreement as he took a bite from his sandwich. And besides, it's free. We both shared a laugh of agreement and then continued to eat. A little while later, I heard the sound of paws walking on hard wood. I looked down and noticed that a small brown tabby cat entered the dining room from the living room. I didn't know we had a cat, I said, staring at the little ball of fur. There's a stray, Alex replied, breaking a piece off his sandwich and tossing it over to the cat. It looked at the piece of bread suspiciously, but then ate it happily before trotting away. We get a lot of those around here since the place is so open. They just climb on over the roof, jump over gates and fences, even jump inside open windows if you aren't careful, Alex explained. But they don't cause you any harm, so long of course you don't bother them, so we just kinda let them do whatever they want. I didn't mind either way, so it wasn't that big of a deal. We continued talking about different things like the weather and politics until late in the afternoon. When he finally noticed that it was getting dark out, Alex took that as his cue to get going. I thanked him for his time and he thanked me for the meal and we went our separate ways. I was about to go up to my room on the second floor when I heard him call out from the front door. I walked over to him and asked him what was up, and he simply said, I forgot to tell you, he said with a grim expression on his face. Whatever you do, don't go up in the attic. Why? What's wrong? I asked him. He looked from side to side as if to see if anyone was listening in. Then he leaned in close and whispered, Ghosts. I laughed out loud after hearing his response. But as I watched the same grim expression on his face, my laughter slowly faded until we were both silent. Are you serious? I asked with a shaky voice. He didn't answer and simply looked back at me with that same grim expression until about 5 seconds later when he burst out laughing. Sorry about that, kid, I couldn't resist, he said with tears in his eyes. You should have seen the look you gave me, he wheezed. After he regained his composure, he continued, But nah, seriously, don't go up into the attic. The wood there is really old and brittle. If you aren't careful, you could go straight through the ceiling and hurt yourself. Once the sun had set, the damn heat finally went away. I lounged around on the second floor by the open window to enjoy the cold northern air. I gazed out into the open window and stared into the peaceful view of the countryside. With all my worries left behind, I breathed a sigh of relief as I watched the quiet neighborhood. After I was done with my daydream, I went back to my room to get some rest. That night, I just laid down in bed and stared at the ivory white ceiling. I tossed and turned, finding a good position to sleep, but I just couldn't get sleepy. I checked the time and saw that it was half an hour past midnight. Since I wasn't getting any sleepier in bed, I decided to stand up and read a bit from one of the books on the shelf. The books themselves were caked in a layer of dust, but other than that, they were still in surprisingly good condition. Nothing particularly stood out, so I just took out one randomly. After patting down the dust, I sat down in front of the desk and started reading. As I was reading, I suddenly heard the sound of a cat mewling from above me. Alex did tell me that it was to be expected, so I just continued reading. The cat continued to cry out as well. Another while later, I heard a loud crashing noise from above me, which honestly made me jump a bit. It must have dropped from the roof or something, I thought, and carried on with my reading. For a while, the sound stopped and the room was once again silent. Only the sound of the AC filled the room. Once I realized that I hadn't retained a single word from what I had just read, I decided that it was probably time to go back to bed. I turned out the lights and got under the covers. But just as I was about to get comfortable, I heard the cat again, only this time it was hissing and snarling as if it were being attacked by something. The ceiling shook and a bit of dust fell. It sounded as if two cats were fighting up there. Maybe they just had a brief scuffle with each other. Eventually, the noise stopped and I finally drifted off to sleep. I got out of bed at noon, a completely drowsy mess. I honestly couldn't tell if I even slept at all, but then again, this wasn't really anything new, so I just rolled with it. I went straight to the kitchen and fixed myself up a cup of coffee. I looked at the fridge and only then did I realize that I completely forgot to buy any groceries. With a rumbling stomach, I got out of the house into the driveway to get in my car and drive into town. I was at the driver's side door of my car when I noticed something strange in the driveway. It was pretty hard to see because of how bright the sun shone that morning, but I was sure of it. A cat was lying on the ground a few feet away from the roof. I got closer and saw that it was dead, lying in a pool of its blood. 3 large gashes lined its side. Judging from how the trail of blood started beneath the roof of the driveway, it was safe to say that this was the cat that must have come from the roof. It was probably even the one making the noise last night. I felt sorry for the cat. It must have caught itself on something. Probably some loose nails or perhaps even steel wires up there in the attic. Judging from its wounds, there was no way another cat did this. I went over to the shed and took out a shovel. I dug a hole in the backyard and laid the cat to rest there. After a moment of silence, I carried on with my day. The rest of the day was pretty uneventful. I bought some groceries from the nearby supermarket and then drove back home. By the time I was finished organizing the stuff I just bought, it was already sundown. I took a quick shower, had some instant ramen for dinner, and then went back to my room to relax. Luckily, I felt sleepy a couple minutes after lying down. Unfortunately, a good night's sleep was too much to ask for, because at around midnight, I woke up to the sound of a loud bang from above me. I groaned and immediately shut my eyes, hoping that I could fall back to sleep easily. But then I heard it again. A cat mewling. I couldn't tell if it was the same cat as last night. It sounded like him, but then again, I can't tell cats apart based on their cries. I listened to it for a while. It was kind of hypnotic in a way. Suddenly, it started to snarl, and the familiar sound of a struggle rang out once again. I laid down in bed and thought about the cat buried out in the yard. What if another one got caught on something? I thought. I knew that it was a terrible idea, but for some reason at the time I thought that I had to go up there and see if I could save it. I walked out into the hallway. The night breeze was exceptionally cold tonight as it came from the open window. I pulled in the latch above and released the stairs. Some dust and a few cobwebs fell as the stairs slowly creaked down. With my phone as my flashlight, I slowly went up the stairs. Alex wasn't kidding when he said that this place was dangerous. The old wood creaked as I stepped on it. I could even feel places where if I put any more weight on it, I would have surely gone straight through. The musty smell of mold and all the dust around made it pretty hard to breathe. I slowly walked over to the spot where the cat most likely was. As I got closer, I was hit with the overwhelming stench of rot and raw sewage. I covered my nose with the collar of my shirt and shined my light over there. Instead of a cat, however, I found something else. It looked like a person, but it was wrong in all the right places. It was completely naked, crouched over with its back behind me. It was eerily thin, and its arms from where I stood looked unnaturally long. I managed to stop myself from yelling, but I couldn't stop myself from letting out an audible gasp. It swung around and looked at me, and I saw its horrible face, and I was sure that there was no way in hell that this thing was human. Its mouth was an absolute bloody mess. Its sharp teeth shone with the light of my phone's flashlight. It sniffed around with the triangular stump it called a nose as it stared in my direction with its pale, round, glassy eyes. For a while, it just stared back at me in silence. But then, to my horror, it started mewling, and I was sure of it. It was the same mewling I heard only moments ago. It continued to smell around for a while. It seemed as though it was having a hard time picking up my scent. Probably because of the smell of the blood and dried shit at its feet. When it finally got tired of sniffing around, it raised its elongated arm and revealed the source of all the fresh blood. On its hand, impaled on one of its 3 long talons, was the lower half of the cat. It brought it closer to its mouth and it began to chew on it. The guttural sound of the meat tearing and the creature chewing on it made my heart sink. I backed away slowly as to not make a sound. It was preoccupied with its meal that it didn't even give me a second thought. I didn't dare to take my eyes off it, even for a second, for fear of it suddenly coming at me. I was only a few feet away from the attic stairs when a loud bang echoed from inside the attic. From behind the thing, another cat dropped in from the roof. The sound made me jump, and I bumped over one of the stacks of the boxes behind me. The creature snarled like a cat as it turned in my direction. It started running with arms outstretched, its sharp talons coming straight at me. I sprinted away as fast as I could, not daring to look back. But I heard a loud crack at my feet, and then a sudden moment of weightlessness. And then, nothing. I woke up the next day to the sound of birds chirping on the windowsill of the window at the second-floor hallway, on top of a pile of rubble and old wood. I stood up with a grunt and felt a sharp pain on my back, no doubt because of how I slept. Other than that, though, luckily, I was completely fine. I was about to laugh off last night's events as my sleepy mind playing tricks on me, but as I looked down on the floor, I saw a pair of large, bloody footprints leading to the open window.